So there have been previous waves of xenophobic attacks in South Africa. I think in 2008, some 60 people were killed. Put these current attacks in context for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to put it in context precisely because I think the causes are the same as the causes of the 2008 attacks. And the basic cause of it all is 20 years into democracy. I think South Africa is experiencing unprecedented levels of poverty. And I think many people are just simply desperate.
I want to get into the issue of poverty, but there was also a speech given by the Zulu King recently, and some say that set off this wave of violence. Talk about his influence on the people there.
The king is really not the instigator. He's merely a kind of opportunist who's really taking advantage of already existing xenophobic and anti-Indian sentiments amongst his followers. And so what he said in that speech, and I listened to a little bit of it, is really about, and ironically it's about Africa and the role of the Zulu people on the African continent. But then with that, he also sort of inserted this idea that somehow foreigners should pack their bags and leave.
How do you square that with the legacy of apartheid? You and I have discussed that many times before. And the cries then for Pan-Africanism.
Right.
How do you square that?
In a way, ironically and paradoxically, it is an aftermath of apartheid in the sense that under apartheid, South Africa and South Africans in general lived in a kind of bubble, both ideologically and economically. So the apartheid state had a national project basically of import substitution. And so that created a lot of jobs. And so 50 years ago, having a job in South Africa meant you worked in a factory. There was predictability, there was constancy, there was no rapid changes in your status as a worker. So you could earn a good living as a worker.
So this is partly nostalgia for the apartheid era?
It's something like that, but the word nostalgia also needs to be contextualized because, again, people would simply say people loved apartheid. No, not really. What people are really missing is the kind of economic security that the apartheid state provided through this kind of protectionism created by sanctions. Because, as I say, South Africa was a little bubble and it didn't have cheap Chinese imports coming into the country. It didn't have that competition. South African products did not have that competition. And so did South African workers. They were largely protected from international competition.
The conversation and the conflict happening in South Africa is similar to conversation being had in other countries, including this one, where there is a concern that somehow local jobs are being taken away by these immigrants. Is there any validity to that argument? I know unemployment is high. It's 24%.
Right. But I was reading the stats, and in the formal sector, non-South African immigrants only account for 4% of the formal sector. So that's not a lot of jobs. So they're taking a very minimal number of South African jobs. And not only that, they actually benefit the South African economy. But that's not, as you know, prejudice doesn't really respond to statistics. You cannot use the statistics as an antidote to people's prejudice, because really this is about prejudice rather than actual facts.